I never believed in magic. Not the kind with rabbits and hats, and certainly not the kind that could twist reality. But when you find yourself questioning your own sanity, sometimes magic seems like the more comforting explanation.
3 months. That's how long I've been living in this apartment, and that's how long the knocking has been happening.
It always started the same way. 3 soft taps against my bedroom wall at exactly 3:17 a.m. Not 3:15, not 3:20, always 3:17. I checked the time enough to know it wasn't a coincidence.
Hello? Is someone there?
The first few nights, I convinced myself it was the pipes. Old buildings make noise. But pipes don't knock in perfect rhythm, and they certainly don't respond when you speak to them.
If someone's playing a joke, it's not funny anymore.
The knocking would stop immediately after I acknowledged it. Then, silence. Until the next night. Always at 3:17 a.m. Always 3 knocks. Always stopping when I spoke. By the second week, I started experimenting. One night I knocked back.
1, 2, 3.
The response was immediate. 4 knocks, not 3, 4. The next night I knocked 4 times. It knocked 5. We were communicating, or at least that's what my sleep-deprived mind believed. I told my friend about it over coffee. He laughed it off.
Dude, it's an old building. Probably just the neighbor's cat or something.
At exactly 3:17 every night, and it responds to me?
You're working too hard. Your mind is playing tricks on you.
Maybe he was right. I'd been pulling long hours at work, and stress can do strange things to a person, so I decided to record it. I set up my phone to capture audio all night. The next morning I played back the recording. There it was. 3:17 a.m. 3 distinct knocks. Then my voice asking if someone was there. Then silence. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. I showed the recording to my friend.
That could be anything. You bumping into something in your sleep. Or maybe you did it yourself without realizing.
While I was asleep?
Sleepwalking is a thing, you know.
I wasn't convinced. So I set up a camera this time, pointed at the wall where the knocking came from. That night, I waited, watching the live feed on my laptop. 3:17 a.m. 3 knocks, clear as day. But on the camera, nothing moved. The wall remained still. The sound had no visible source.
What the hell?
I knocked back 4 times. The response came 5 knocks, but the wall never moved, not even a vibration. The next day, I knocked on my neighbor's door. An elderly woman answered.
Can I help you?
I'm sorry to bother you, but have you been hearing any strange knocking at night around 3 a.m.?
Knocking? No, dear. I take my hearing aids out at night. I wouldn't hear a tornado if it came through my bedroom.
I asked the building manager if anyone had lived in my apartment before me.
That unit? Been empty for about a year before you moved in. Previous tenant was some quiet guy kept to himself. Left suddenly, though. Didn't even take all his stuff.
Did he say why he was leaving?
No, just left the keys in my mailbox with a note saying he couldn't stay another night. Weird, right?
Very weird. That night, I decided to try something different. Instead of responding to the knocks, I asked a question.
What do you want?
Silence. Then, slowly, 11 distinct knocks.
11, what does that mean?
10 more knocks.
Are you counting down?
9 knocks. A chill ran down my spine. It was counting down, but to what? I didn't respond further that night, and eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. The next day I researched the history of my building. Nothing unusual came up. No tragic deaths, no mysterious disappearances. Nothing that would explain a haunting. But I did find something interesting. The building was constructed on land that once belonged to a traveling carnival in the early 1900s. That night, at 3:17 a.m., the knocks came again. 3, as always. I was ready.
Are you connected to the carnival that was here?
8 knocks.
8, the countdown continues. What happens when you reach 0?
No response to that question, just silence. The next night, 7 knocks. The night after, 6. By this point, I was barely sleeping. Dark circles had formed under my eyes, and my co-workers were starting to notice.
You look terrible. Are you sleeping at all?
Not really. I've got some noise issues in my apartment.
Have you tried earplugs? Or maybe a white noise machine?
If only it were that simple. This wasn't about blocking out the sound. This was about understanding what was happening before the countdown reached 0. That night, 5 knocks.
Please, just tell me what you want.
For the first time, something different happened. Instead of knocks, I heard a scratching sound, faint at first, then louder. It sounded like fingernails dragging across the wall. I pressed my ear against the wall. The scratching continued, moving in what seemed like patterns. I grabbed a piece of paper and held it against the wall, tracing over it with a pencil, hoping to capture whatever was being scratched on the other side. When I pulled the paper away and turned on the light, my blood ran cold. There, in rough, jagged lines, was a crude drawing of a door. Just a simple rectangle with a circle for a doorknob. Below it, scratched deeply enough that the pencil had torn through the paper in places, was a single word. Open.
Open what? There's no door here.
I examined the wall carefully. Solid drywall. No hidden panels, no secret passages. Just a normal wall in a normal apartment. Or so it seemed. The next night, 4 knocks.
I don't understand what you want me to open. There's no door here.
The scratching came again, more frantic this time. I repeated the tracing process. This time the message was different. Make door.
Make a door? In my wall? That's insane.
3 knocks. The countdown was accelerating. No longer 1 number per night. Now it was dropping faster. I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment trying to make sense of it all. Make a door? Was I really considering cutting a hole in my wall based on mysterious knocking? 2 knocks.
Wait, please. I need more time to understand.
1 knock. Loud. Definitive. The scratching returned, more violent than before. It sounded like the wall was being clawed apart from the inside. I pressed paper against it again. The message was simple. Now. I don't know what possessed me. Lack of sleep, curiosity, fear of what would happen when the countdown reached 0. Whatever the reason, I found myself in the hardware store the next morning, buying a small handsaw.
Home project?
Something like that.
Well, be careful with that. It's sharper than it looks.
Back in my apartment, I stood before the wall, saw in hand, feeling like I'd completely lost my mind. But the alternative? Waiting to see what happened when the countdown ended seemed worse somehow. I marked out a rectangle on the wall, roughly the size of a small door. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I began to cut. The drywall gave way easily. Too easily, almost as if it wanted to be cut. As I worked, I noticed something strange. The wall was warm to the touch. Not room temperature, but warm, like skin. When I'd cut 3 sides of my makeshift door, I hesitated. What was I doing? This was madness. I was destroying my apartment based on knocking that might very well be all in my head. But then it came. A knock. Not from the wall this time, but from inside the rectangular cut I'd made. Something was knocking from inside the section I'd nearly removed.
No.
0 knocks. The countdown was complete. With trembling hands, I cut the final side of the rectangle. The section of wall didn't fall inward or outward. It simply vanished the moment the cut was complete, as if it had never been there at all. I expected to see my neighbor's apartment on the other side. Instead, there was only darkness. A darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light from my room.
What is this?
A voice answered from the darkness. Not male, not female. Something else entirely.
You opened it, finally.
Opened what? What is this place?
The door, of course. We've been waiting so long.
As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I began to make out shapes. Twisted, elongated figures that seemed to shift and change when I tried to focus on them. They moved with a fluidity that wasn't quite natural, like puppets controlled by invisible strings.
For over a century we've been trapped. The carnival master bound us when he closed the show for the final time, bound us to this space between spaces.
The carnival? From the early 1900s?
Yes, we were the main attraction. The things people came to see but pretended they hadn't when they left. The master called us his peculiarities.
One of the shapes moved closer to the opening. I still couldn't make out details, just a vague humanoid form with proportions that seemed wrong somehow.
But now you've opened the way, and we can finally leave.
Leave? Leave to where?
To your world, of course. We need bodies to exist there, vessels.
The shape reached toward the opening. What I had thought was a hand had far too many fingers, each one impossibly long and jointed in multiple places.
Stay back.
Don't be afraid. It's a fair exchange. You opened our door, now we'll show you ours.
I tried to back away, but found I couldn't move. My feet seemed rooted to the floor.
So many doors between so many worlds. We've seen them all from our prison, but we could never open them ourselves. We needed someone like you.
I'm closing this. This was a mistake.
I reached for the section of wall I'd cut out, but it was gone. There was nothing to put back in place.
11 days. That's how long we've been calling to you. 11 days of knocking, trying to make you understand. And now the countdown is complete.
The shape began to emerge from the darkness. As it crossed the threshold into my apartment, its form seemed to blur and distort, like a television with bad reception.
Don't worry, it won't hurt. Your consciousness will simply step aside for a while. And when we're done, when we've experienced your world fully, we might even give it back.
More shapes were moving toward the opening now, dozens of them, each more distorted and wrong than the last.
No, stay back.
In desperation, I grabbed the handsaw and swung it at the first figure. It passed through as if cutting smoke. The figure laughed, a sound like glass breaking in reverse.
Physical tools can't harm us, not while we're between, but once we're through.
The first figure was almost completely through the opening now. As it fully entered my world, its form began to solidify, taking on a more human appearance. But there was still something profoundly wrong about it, like a human being drawn by someone who'd only had humanity described to them. And then I understood. This wasn't magic. This wasn't paranoia. This was something worse. Something that had been waiting, knocking, counting down.
Please don't do this.
Too late. The door is open, and doors work both ways.
The figure reached for me with its too many fingers. As they touched my face, I felt a cold, so intense it burned. And then a pulling sensation, as if something essential was being drawn out of me. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was my own face, looking back at me from the figure, my features settling over its form like a mask that didn't quite fit. I'm still here, In this space between spaces, knocking, always knocking. 3 taps at 3:17 a.m. The new tenant hears me. I can tell. Soon, they'll get curious. Soon, they'll investigate. And maybe, just maybe, they'll open a door for me. Because now, I understand what the figure meant. Doors work both ways. And I've learned how to count down.
11.